All right, we're back with the Breath of Fresh Controversy podcast. My name is Zach.
My name is Kira.
And today we are going to be going over a video that I found called Don't Be a Slut, Be a Lady, they said. And I had a friend that posted about this on social media, and I thought it was very interesting. And my friend is a very motivated young woman who recently won some bodybuilding competitions. She's very much woman power, awesome, very, very proud of her, known her since high school, and she is really, really great. We'll probably have her on sometime maybe to talk about this or other topics. But I found this video, and I mean, there are things that I definitely agree with it, for sure, hands down. And there are videos similar to, that even Kiara here has found, that kind of talk about the men's side of things. But I found overall the video to be sort of misleading in this whole idea that society and culture, at least, maybe I should have you start, Kiara, before I dive into my opinions of the video. But I had some issues and I had some qualms with what I was hearing. So, but what did you think of the video?
I thought, obviously as a woman, I do agree with most of it. However, also as a woman that thinks, for everybody in a way, I feel that there are some things in there that are a little bit made up, I guess, by other women. Not that that's really necessarily a bad thing. It's probably just something that they have heard along the time of their life, from a man or whatever. But I do think it's really interesting, because there are some things in there that I didn't even think about that I have sort of pressure on myself. But at the same time, I feel it's important to have self-control, not as in more of don't let those things affect you. Just know that your self-confidence is the word I'm kind of looking for here. Is you have to make sure that you do have self-confidence in yourself no matter what the society stereotype is, pretty much. That's what I've kind of come to realize, definitely. So
yeah. I think overall, especially in these younger generations, like our generation and the generation after us, definitely, with all the social media we have, self-confidence is generally going down. And I think some of that is because we're so connected, that we are connected to all the hyper beautiful, hyper intelligent, hyper skilled and talented people around the world, and that makes us feel less about ourselves. Whereas if we weren't as connected to that stratosphere, we would be able to see ourselves in a hierarchy amidst, maybe just the people in your town or the people in the town next door, and maybe you wouldn't feel so terrible about yourself in that regard. And that might also be a very positive force. The flip side is that we have these greater models of people who are so talented, so beautiful, so skilled, so smart, that we have an even higher, something to aim at that's even higher than what would be if we didn't have that stratosphere. Yeah. So there's a yin and a yang, right? There's a pro and a con. I think something too that comes with the social media stuff is just the general social anxiety, right? Imagine before phones, how humans interact. Imagine just that I was going to tell you about the future, right? And the future is everyone's going to have this little plastic device with a screen, and they're going to be looking at it over 50% of the time instead of looking at each other or looking around at the world around them, and what kind of behavioral things might come from someone that's constantly looking at a screen. Well, one of them might be they might forget how to communicate with people, right? And so that social anxiety might lead towards, again, a lack of confidence, a lack of self-confidence, right? Yeah. Because you're so absorbed with that world, the screen world, right? The video games, the laptops, the computers, the cell phones, the Apple Watch, all of it, right? Yeah. It can become overwhelming. Whereas, we're 90s babies. We can kind of remember a time where phones hung up on the wall, and you could call somebody, and in order to get to them, you had to talk to the parents first. Oh, hi, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Is Johnny home? God. Can you come out and play baseball? We remember some of that.
It taught people how to communicate too. That's another thing.
Well, right. Well, even that kind of communication was different than before phones existed. You had to go knock on Johnny's door and see if he could come out after dinner, right?
Communicate in person,
Exactly, right? So the amount of communication that's changed is, I think that's something that definitely affects something like confidence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of what they're saying, right, the whole, your skirt is too short, cover up, men can't control themselves, blah, blah, blah. It's like a lot of that kind of hyper-criticism is more directly in your face because of things like Twitter that didn't exist 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because of things like Facebook and Instagram that didn't exist 20 years ago, right? Yeah. So I think these things always existed.
Yeah. But I honestly feel that the media as well, I'm not trying to be like this conspiracy theorist over here or whatever, but I feel like the media really portrays people like negative, not everybody negative, but like negative idols in a way sometimes. So like if something happened or like Kim Kardashian, oh my god, I always see these. Kim Kardashian's photos are photoshopped. It's so obvious. Like, can you spot it or whatever? And, like, obviously, yeah, Photoshop's a big thing. You see the magazine covers and they're pointing out things in women. And that was in the video, too. Like, this, you let yourself go. Or, oh my gosh, she looks like a skeleton. Like, she needs to eat, And I feel that when that judgment is in the media a lot more, or like these negative idols or people that you see in the media a lot that are doing bad things, or like maybe even people with a lot of plastic surgery too that you see like that are really in the news and shit.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's also like kind of, you see that and you're thinking about yourself in a way, like comparing,
Oh,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, obviously the whole cell phone thing is very not good to have. Social media thing more, but...
Well, right. I think it's just kind of, it puts a lot of these things in our face constantly, more than it ever has been before. And then how does that change human behavior? How does that sort of change people's perceptions of themselves?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And so I do think that maybe some of these things that have existed prior to are sort of exacerbated. Yeah. Another thing I thought was exacerbated was the concept and idea throughout the video is that this is all things that men say to women. Right?
Yeah.
That was a huge overtone in the video, that this was all things that were said by men to women. And as I watched the video, maybe after I got 30 seconds into the video, I more so thought, to be very real, that this is all stuff that women say to women. I don't think that men say the majority of things that were said to women. I think men... More often than not, it's not that men don't say certain things. Like, it's not that I've never heard a man say, "Wow, you're so thin, you should eat more," right?
Yeah.
Or yeah, maybe you should lose 10, 15 pounds. Like, it's not that men don't say that, but on average, men appreciate the female image far more than they denigrate it. Okay? There are far more. Here's an example we talked about off mic, but I want those listeners to hear this point too. And that is, if you've ever been in a relationship, especially as a girl who's been in a relationship, you've probably noticed this or heard this before, especially a long-term relationship. More often than not, when you're waking up in the morning, you got no makeup on, you're like in your pajamas, looking real sloppy, hair's a mess, you're really kind of feeling like, oh my god, this is the worst I will ever look, all day or all week. And you turn to your boyfriend, and your boyfriend's just sitting there in the kitchen, maybe making breakfast or something, and he just turns to you and goes, "Babe, you are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," right? And so more men don't really care about these sort of model-like images or what have you. More men exist out there that sort of worship the female image more than they denigrate it. And I do see within female circles, right, and females talking, like, women that have a lot of female friends as opposed to a combination or a lot of male friends, they are constantly criticized. It's like the embodiment of the zodiac, the Virgo zodiac signs. Like, they're super critical, hypercritical people, very dramatic, high neuroticism, but they're just super, super critical of each other constantly.
Yes,
it's like, how can these people even call each other friends when you guys are just talking so much shit about each other, even like picking out, oh, their makeup's a little off, or oh, so-and-so, oh, that doesn't match those shoes, blah, blah.
Or just like, making judgments about their life, too, and what friends that they're hanging out with. I have dealt with that.
And guys don't do that as much. I'm not saying that we don't do that, but we don't do that as much.
Yeah.
We criticize each other and we put each other down in much different ways, but we don't pick at each other's, like, how we look, or it's a lot different. It's a lot different.
Yeah.
And And there's a great example of how like aggressiveness comes out in men and women that they've done in psychological tests. Men are more likely to be violent towards one another, like get in actual fist fights.
Yeah.
And the female side is women are more likely to be like verbally abusive to one another, or like to denigrate and be again, kind of to the point of the verbal criticism.
Yeah.
Men are more likely to actually fight each other over disputes, whereas women are more like, I'm going to talk smack about you and create drama behind your back. They don't really fight each other as often.
That's why you gotta have a balance between friends, men and women.
Yeah.
Like for a man and a woman to be friends with both.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know, that's kind of how I am, I feel, you know?
Yeah.
I feel more men, actually. I'm more friends with men.
Yeah. I think it's a lot easier.
Because of that, yeah.
And I think, again, that leans into a lot of the other things that I've said before, but I think a lot of it leans into more of I think men have far more respect for women than women care to admit, and a lot of it falls back on this idea of, I mean, I want to be careful with what I say because I don't want to take too much of it might be taken out of context.
I can kind of back you up in a way too.
But here's a good example of the real roots of what I want to get at with this video and in general.
Yeah. Is
that in society, an example. I'm big on the personality traits, and the personality traits, there's the big 5, and they spell out ocean. So it's OCEAN.
Mm-hmm.
O is openness, trait openness. There's trait conscientiousness. There's trait extroversion. There's trait agreeableness, and there's trait neuroticism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so something like trait agreeableness is associated with compassion and aggression. Those are ways that high trait agreeableness and low trait agreeableness can manifest. And what do you mean by that, Zach? Well, low trait agreeableness, which would mean you're disagreeable, can mean things like you are manipulative, you're aggressive, things like that. And high trait agreeableness leads to things like being gullible, being compassionate, being forgiving. Okay? Women are usually more agreeable than men. So this is, and it's a very, on a population level, there's very little difference, right? It's kind of like, 6 out of 10 women are more agreeable than men. That's not a big difference, right? It's really, really close to 50-50.
Yeah.
It's like 6 to 4, 60-40, right?
Sure.
So it's very close. But on the tails of the distribution, when you get to the top 20 most agreeable people, and you get to the top 20 or low 20 or top 20 most disagreeable people, the top 20 most agreeable people are all women, and the top 20 most disagreeable people are all men. So when you're looking for the top 20 most aggressive persons in the world, they're all men, right? There's not a woman to be found, not even in the top 200. Okay, so that's sort of where the differences matter and they manifest. Right?
Yeah.
And it's something to put a finger on, especially and I'll kind of get to why any of that matters with this video in a second. But it's something that isn't really, really disputed, right? We don't really dispute that men are more aggressive than women, right? Everyone just kind of knows that and accepts that. But this is because of personality trait research, right? So here's where I'm going to flip it on women, and I'm going to say something that might sound anti-women, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say men are more aggressive than women if you're going to refute this next bit, okay? And this next bit is neuroticism, okay? And neuroticism, again, this is going to sound really basic when I talk about it, and you're going to be like, well, yeah, okay, but listen to where I'm going with it. So neuroticism is like, high trait neuroticism is something like highly emotional, highly self-aware would be a positive trait, but most of it's like high emotion, high anxiety, high depression, like super high emotions, sort of, right? And low trait neuroticism would be sort of like you don't feel anything, right? It's the person that sits at a funeral and doesn't cry, right? It's kind of like you're very stoic, to refer to some Greek philosophers, right? It's kind of like you have a good sense about you. You can take criticism and you like brush it off, right? That's sort of low trait neuroticism. And both things, it's good to be self-aware and high trait neuroticism, and it's really good to be able to brush off criticism and let it flow off you. The Stoics have a really great method, the Greek philosophers, the Stoics, have a really great method of being. I think a lot of people could use a nice dose of, especially with everything else I just said about social media and how much there's all this stuff out there that's going to sort of lower your self-confidence. And if you don't know how to deal with that properly, it can really bring you down. It could crush you even. Some people it can really crush, and it does.
Yeah.
So, but the high trait neuroticism is something akin to, there's often jokes that are made about it, like women are too emotional to be CEOs or the president, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's going to be her time of the month and blah, blah, blah. And these stupid jokes are sort of made, right? But the truth in some of that is that women tend to be more neurotic than men. And men tend to be low in trait neuroticism.
Was that the drop?
Okay. So, see?
The offensive drop, was that the...
Yes, well, this is where it could lead into this whole, oh, you're calling women emotional. It's like,
yeah, no, you're right. But you know what? You really backed
test...
yourself up about that, and I appreciate all, like, the research you've done about that, because I didn't even think of it that way. And, like, sometimes I hate when people are like, oh, you're so emotional, but at the same time... It is true, and I'm okay to admit that now more. You know what I mean?
And
there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, it's something that you notice, right? It's like you sort of notice the people who are able to let things slide and be cool, calm, and collected.
Yeah.
More often than not, again, 6 out of 10 times are male, and 4 out of 10 times are female. And then when you look at people who are getting highly emotional about a situation, regardless of how tense it may actually be, okay? I saw this in that show, the popular Netflix show Love is Blind. There was a great example of that. There was a couple in there, I forget their names. There was a blonde girl and then the redhead guy. The redhead guy was like typical low neuroticism, and the blonde girl was typical high neuroticism. And just watching them sort of go at it was very, very interesting. You're gonna pull up their names.
These are the actors' names.
Well, those are the hosts. I don't know if they have their actual names.
I thought it'd come up right away.
Yeah, I know.
But it didn't. It looks like this is the show, though.
Yeah.
Amber confronts Jessica.
Oh, that was so funny to watch. That was great. She called her out.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, maybe we could do a whole show about that. That was if you got time to watch it, you could do that in a week. But me and my girlfriend followed it, so that was interesting. But anyways, so with trait neuroticism and how it affects the video is sort of calling out, and you hear we have some quotes here, talking about how women are, all these criticisms are thrown at women, and the video again tends to act like all of this is being said by men.
Yeah.
And I make the argument that most of the things I heard are said by women to other women, okay? Not to say that men don't also say them, but I think women are far more critical of other women too. And I think I see a lot of women kind of recognizing that, right? They're kind of like, fix the girl's crown instead of, trying to rip it off her head or something like that, right?
Yeah, I definitely have seen a lot of that, yeah. So I definitely agree with you there, yeah. And I think also there's a lot of stuff, like I said, in the media or whatever, where people are saying, like, oh my gosh, look at how this dude treated this chick, and, like, that comes out a lot more. And then the whole men is trash movement or whatever, or men are trash, men is trash, men are trash or whatever. Like, people kind of have to, I feel, chill a little bit on that, I guess, because, like, not all men are trash, It's, It's just portrayed more.
I would make the argument that high trait neuroticism is just as dangerous as low trait agreeableness, and that means what I'm saying there is I think highly emotional, unstable, and overly self-aware people are just as dangerous as highly hyper-aggressive people. Now, I'm making some different opinions in the comments and everything.
Sure.
But I think high neuroticism, like the whole men are trash movement, can become hyperly aggressive. It's like at the tip of the roller coaster, right? It's like right there, So that's what I mean, where it's like it can become, if people can't learn to kind of just like chill and roll with the punches a little bit, you start to get this weirdly tyrannical motif. You get you get a weirdly tyrannical motif, or you get people who are like suicidal, right? And that's where the high emotion can kind of switch, right?
Yeah.
It's like you get people who are so anxious about the world that they just want to control everything.
Yeah.
Or you get them so depressed that they just hate themselves and they just want to end it all. Those are kind of the two extremes of high neuroticism.
Yeah.
One definitely has a tyrannical element to it, just like highly disagreeable people have a manipulative and highly aggressive attributes.
Yeah.
So so I think they are things that, again, like there is this whole kind of cultural move to rip on men and praise women, and I'm not against praising women for what it's worth, but I do think that everyone can be better, and being self-aware is highly neurotic. It's a pro of neuroticism, right? Exactly. So being self-aware, truly self-aware, means confronting things like your own high trait neuroticism. And I think we could all take a nice long look at some Stoic philosophies. There's probably like 20-page books out there you could fly through in an evening for most of us.
That's very interesting. I've never heard that kind of research, honestly. I know it was out there, but I never looked into it. I didn't know it was so relatable to this,
Yeah,
and that could be really therapeutic for somebody to see that and understand more of how humans are, and just especially nowadays people are so sensitive. Mm-hmm. So it's just very interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if I even have it.
To be honest with you, when you first started talking about it, I was so lost and I wasn't quite understanding.
Yeah, you're like,
and then when you kind
of
finished it up and you wrapped up, I was like, all right, yeah, I'm really getting it now. Kind of takes me a second, but.
Yeah. Well, right. It's a lot of these, neuroticism sounds like narcissism, but the words are different, right? And they are sort of related. Like high neuroticism can be narcissistic, but not entirely, right?
Yeah.
So if anyone's curious, I'll toss this in. Oh no, I don't have internet on here.
Right.
Here, look up Ocean personality traits. We'll kind of go through this just in case anybody's not aware of what these personality traits are. We can kind of list them off.
Hopefully y'all don't hear my loud keyboard.
Yeah.
Okay, you want me to pull up the picture?
Just pull up the one with the yellow in the middle and the blue on the sides.
Right here.
Yeah, pull that one up. Let's see what that one looks like.
Oh, can I get it bigger?
Yeah. So this will be good.
I'm just seeing it. Oh, there we go.
Perfect. So right. So openness. So openness is definitely both hemispheres of the brain, right? Openness, high trait openness would be high imagination. New ideas, untraditional, discovering the unknown, right? Reaching out into the unknown, discovering the unknown. And low trait openness would be things like you're rooted in tradition, okay? And often gets associated with the negative things of that would be like something like racism and sexism can be related to people who are often low trait openness. Yeah. It's very rare to find someone who's racist and sexist who's truly high trait openness.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that would probably think they're high trait openness who are actually low trait openness.
How did you find this out?
That is very interesting.
How do you officially find that shit out? Or do you just judge yourself on it? You know what I mean? If I thought I was, because I feel like I'm really open, but if I found out I wasn't, how would I find that out?
There are tests that you can take online, I'm sure. I'm sure there's tests you can take online. Now, the accuracy of some of those tests, I don't know, some of those could be like those silly Facebook quizzes, right? Yeah. It's don't trust that stuff.
True.
But there are psychology grade, high university tests that are available online that you can go take. And it might take you, 10 minutes to run through it. But if you're really curious about this kind of stuff, you can kind of see how you fall and what traits you need to try and integrate more of the opposite into, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's more so about. It's kind of like you want to bring a balance between these two things because both things have positives and negatives.
Yeah.
Okay. Like agreeableness. We can talk about agreeableness. Compassion is great, but being gullible isn't. Right?
Yeah.
And low trait agreeableness, you're like, well, what's the positive about being aggressive or being manipulative? A part of low trait agreeableness is being able to put your foot down. Okay? It's like telling someone when something is enough. Another part of low trait agreeableness is fighting for your income. almost most of the wealth gap, besides the biological factors of women get pregnant, can actually be attributed to women's high trait agreeableness. And that means if a job is offering you $29 an hour, you're more likely to go, yeah, absolutely, I'll take that. I'll take that. Yeah. I'll take that. That's great. Whereas men, if they go in expecting 35, they'll be like, no, that's not enough. How about 31? And then the job will go yay or nay, right? But men will more likely to be able to put their foot down and fight for a higher pay raise or a higher income level than women who are more agreeable, right? So this is where being highly agreeable being highly disagreeable pays off, and being highly agreeable is kind of a bad thing. So there's a pro and con to everything. So it's important to be compassionate and forgiving, right? Like high trait agreeableness, there's a lot of things attached to that are very easy to go, these are things we want to instill in society and instill in people. There's not a lot of things on the surface that you could find nuggets of gold or truth in on low trait agreeableness, but one of them is learning when to put your foot down and say enough is enough. Yeah. Right? So that's one thing. But let's kind of truck through here. So openness is all about the high trait openness is reaching into the unknown, discovery, untraditional things. And then low trait openness is something like being rooted in tradition, being practical, all that kind of stuff. Conscientiousness is the next one. So OCEAN, right? Yeah. Ocean. Consciousness. Now, consciousness, aside from IQ, is the highest predictor of success, long-term success. So if we didn't have IQ, consciousness would be the next greatest predictor. Yeah. And consciousness is something like high trait consciousness are people who are responsible, on time, organized. Okay. And people who are low trait consciousness are unreliable, very, very impulsive, careless, disorganized, all that kind of stuff. Conscientiousness is probably one of the only traits where it's very difficult to find a nugget of value from the low trait or from the undesirable trait. I would say it's not necessarily that all the time, every single time, low trait, whatever is good. Like low trait neuroticism is probably good. It might be a better thing than high trait neuroticism. Yeah. But I think the nugget of truth you can get from low trait conscientiousness is like pacing yourself. Working 80 hours a week is not healthy for you, right? Yeah. So people who are high trait conscientious will work themselves to the bone, okay? And that's something that is really, really important to have in life. But it's also important to take a chill pill.
Yeah, have a balance.
Have a beer. Take vacation. You know what I mean? Spend some time with your family, right? These are also really, really important things to integrate into society, integrate into people's persons. Yeah. But that's conscientiousness. Extroversion's pretty self-explanatory. Extroversion, people who are high trait extroversion are more outgoing, warm, seeking attention, things like that, right? Okay. And then introverts are more quiet, recluse, keep to themselves. Things like that. And there's obviously pros and cons on both sides, right? Yeah. Integrating both those things is a great, wonderful thing. Yeah. We've already gone over agreeableness plenty, and neuroticism I think we've also gone over plenty as well. So it's interesting. Those are the personality traits. And I didn't even imagine that we'd dive into most of that today, but let's go back to the videos a little bit. So that's kind of how I was viewing the video as I'm watching it. I'm going, some of this is high trait neuroticism. Some of this is like a feminist swing of anti-men, pro-women, feel sorry for women. And I can get on board with some of that, but not all of it. And so the first thing I really recognized as I watched the video is most of this is things that women say to women. The second thing was the high neuroticism. I'm like, well, some of this is sort of, feel sorry for me, woe is me, and not being able to let some of these remarks slide off and just be calm, cool, and collected and be like, I'm a boss-ass bitch. I don't care what the hell you say, right? You know what I mean? Or maybe more realistically and less sassy and or rude, is that the average person, it's like if your boyfriend loves you when you wake up and you're no makeup on, your hair's a mess and everything, it's like, who cares? Yeah. Who cares, right? Who gives a flying fuck? If some other girl thinks that she finds validation in getting 3,000 likes every time she posts on Instagram. Yeah. Who gives a fuck? You get to roll out of bed and your boyfriend's like, you look fucking fantastic. right?
Yeah.
You know, that's the kind of thing where it's like, I think women beat themselves up too much, and they let other women beat them up too.
Yeah.
You know,
and
in
I
this
also
realm.
think that a lot of women that do have boyfriends and good men in their life, that they need to realize that a little bit more, because if you're constantly distracted by things you see online, especially like this, not that this is completely bad, but like you might think, you know, well, my boyfriend doesn't actually think I'm pretty. He's just lying to me because this post says that men are liars or whatever. You know what I mean? And you know what? Like that's been a thing in the past that I fell victim to.
This is what he's really thinking. He won't tell me.
Yeah,
It's like,
and that's why. I mean, gosh, I'm a little bit insecure and stuff, and I think every woman is. And I've had it really bad before, where I was just like, gosh, men are like really bad, and like none of them actually care about me or whatever. And especially maybe the way I was treated in the past, but you have to move on from that. You really do. And it sucks when, you know, you get mistreated like that, you get cheated on or whatever. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, if men have said this to you, like any of the things in the video or whatever, that, you know, that's hard to hear. Mm-hmm. But you do have to move past that. You do, you know.
Right.
Obviously that's better said than done, but...
Yeah, you know. I mean, and you also you want to be careful with anecdotal things as well, and go, oh, well, you know, the last 10 boyfriends I've had are so shitty, and men are like this, and it's like, well, maybe you're going for the wrong kind of guy. You know, maybe you're in a bad area. You know, and maybe you're in the wrong kind of social circles, and people can go. I see
so many females online that I could just figure that out from, to be honed.
Well, right. I think
the same dudes.
Yeah, I see it as well, and you know, everyone's trying to work on themselves, and so, you know, I think the more you work on yourself, the more you'll attract people who are also working on themselves, right? Be it significant others, be it friends, you know, and family, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so when you're not working on yourself, you're sort of attracting the same kind of people into your life.
Yeah.
And so when you are low in self-confidence, and then you're with somebody else who's also low in self-confidence, one of you is probably going to end up trying to put the other one down to pick yourself up. And it's happened, girls will do this to men as well. So it's not always that men are going to put women down, just feel good about themselves, in order to be in control. I've seen plenty of women do it to men as well. So, you know, we have to be careful with, I think that was something that really bothered me right away, was like this connotation that men are saying all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, man, most of the guys I know, they would be lucky, would feel lucky to have a girlfriend. Right, they would feel lucky to, like, and they would appreciate it a lot, you know, and they would take care of the girl and all kind of stuff. So, I don't know. But again, maybe some of that's anecdotal as well, and maybe I'm a little out of tune with reality too. So, another thing you found, and I thought this was fascinating as well, was there was a video that was done that's more of a To Be a Man.
Yeah, it's by Cab Life. On YouTube.
Yeah, and I found it interesting. Can we go to the quotes from that video? So I thought they were very interesting. Well, I found this one less interesting. I found this one again. I just have qualms with both these videos. I think the one about the women, you know. What was that one titled? Be a Lady? Be a Lady. Don't be a slut.
Don't be a slut. Be a lady or whatever.
And I do think that there's a lot of sexual pressure on women, definitely. And I like to see that women are sort of reclaiming their sort of power in the sexual realm. I think that is important. I think it is something that maybe, I think it might be exacerbated how much men have sort of had the reins of power with this whole patriarchy crap. I don't know if I'm totally on board with all of that, but I do think that there probably was an influx, and things have kind of, you know, swung more towards the feminine, and for right or wrong, you know, I have my criticisms, I have my praise, but I do think women have needed something like this for a while, if you've been paying attention to most of human history. So in that sense, I like that women are sort of reclaiming their power over their sexuality. I don't know if they're doing it entirely well, and with the introduction of birth control, it kind of reinvented women's sexuality, and the tampon too. Those are things, I don't know if people are aware, those are things that were both invented within the last 100 years. So human history went without both of those things for a long time. And so those two things reinvented women completely in what they are, almost as a biological creature.
Can you explain more on that? I'm curious. Like, how?
Well, sure. So an example with tampons is, so if a girl that was at work and she was bleeding all over herself, I mean, what did she use to clean up? Wouldn't that be pretty embarrassing to have your period in the middle of the office?
Yeah,
you know, or the factory or something, right? It's like, oh, clean up on aisle Kira, you know?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
That's kind of, it's kind of like, oh, it's like TMI. It's
how
disgusting.
has it changed?
But how? Well, I think some of these sorts of things may have shaped how humans interacted, i.e. the man goes out to work and the woman stays at home to raise the children, right? I think some of these kinds of things play a part, right? Because social embarrassment is written deeply into our psychology.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was something that you either have to socially normalize blood coming out of somebody's legs, which is sort of a grotesque thing to have around children, right? Or have the woman stay at home so that she can take care of herself when that stuff arises, right? And so things like that, these biological functions, might have shaped how men and women sort of functioned, right? It might have been a contributing factor. I'm not saying that's, oh my God, this is the reason why, but it's a contributing factor, right?
Yeah.
The fact that women also have to carry a child in their womb is another contributing factor to something like that, for example, right? It's like, well, a man doesn't have to carry an extra 30, 40 pounds on their gut for 9 months, you know, so that's also a contributing factor of why the woman would have to stay home and the man would go out and work the field, right, and milk the cows and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Not to say that women didn't do those things when they weren't pregnant, right? But, you know, there's human biology that you can't really, this wasn't something that was decided, right? It's not like we started a sim game and went, yep, this biological function is going to go to men, and these biological functions are going to go to women. It's like, this is all the cards we were dealt, right? The way birth control affected things was you are able to, you know, stop your stop menstrual cycle. You're essentially playing with the idea of being able to have sex without as much consequence or consequence whatsoever.
Yes.
And that definitely...
And it does stop your menstrual cycle, I believe. I haven't really been on birth control lately, so I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure.
But what it does is, what I'm saying is that these things are revolutionary things in how they change what women are entirely, right? And how these biological functions affected how humans behave. Yeah. You know, over the course of human history. And these are big changes. These are not big changes that can necessarily be ignored. And it's why, I mean, what have we noticed culturally and historically since those inventions have come into play, right? It's like women want to do all these things that they haven't been able to do because of biology, right? Because of a biological consequence of sex and because of the biological consequence and embarrassment of having periods, right? Yeah. And so, you know, and it's not, and don't get me wrong, this is like, it's not fair, right? But there are also biological consequences of being a man that women don't have to face either, right? Right, yeah. I'm sure the feminists are squirming when I say that, and I could have a whole conversation about that. Maybe maybe in a little bit here, maybe I can dive into that a smidge. I'm not going to say which one's worse or better, but there are consequences and pros of being a man and a woman, right?
This is why we have the title Breath of Fresh Controversy, because it is very controversial what we're talking about. And I just like to say, too, that there are some things that you've said that I have disagreed with you, but the important thing is I'm willing to have the conversation with you still. Oh, yeah. And we still get along, you know? I'm I don't have to agree with everything you say, and maybe some people won't. But I just want to, say that because I feel, if we do get a little bit bigger and people start seeing this, we'll see those comments. But, I mean, this is really just a talking, we're just talking.
I welcome them, and I welcome anyone to come on our podcast to talk about these things. We can rehash these topics, go over new ones. If you have a lot of evidence, please come on the podcast. I would love to hear it. This is
all about the conversation.
Open forum, open dialogue.
Yeah.
So
I think it's important for people to have a conversation. Yeah. Maybe they don't agree with necessarily. But.
And I guess here, I'll dive into a smidge of what do you mean by the biological consequences of being a man, right?
Sure.
And we might dive into a little bit of this here when we go over the Be a Man video, but so I think some of what a biological consequence of being a man or something that's tied into it is so there's often the whole thing about how, and the Be a Lady video talks about this, about how, you got to have kids. Oh, you don't want kids? You're going to want them eventually.
Yeah.
And I had an issue with that because I don't think it's something that women want to hear, but I think it's something that women experience. And so when you're a young woman at 20, 25, and you're like, hell no, I'm not going to have kids. My career comes first. I have to have my whole life together. Blah, 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 blah. Okay?
Sure.
And it's like, good for you. I want you to have your life together before you have kids. Clearly, I do not want people having children without getting their life together first. Okay?
Yeah.
But when we look at the biology, which it's like you can think and feel however you want, okay? Biology is important, all right? And especially when you're trying to figure yourself out and act like you know yourself. If you don't know your biology, well, I don't know if you know yourself completely, right? And human biology, the women stop producing eggs as much in their mid-30s. And that starts to trail off very, very quickly. Whereas a man can get a girl pregnant well into his 50s if he wants to, you know? And again, this is sort of, again, like there's the initial thing there, the initial belief or perspective is that evolutionary advantage to men, right? Evolutionary advantage to men. But there's two ways in how this is not an evolutionary advantage to men.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, one, you're going to have to go back and listen to the sexual arena theory. I'm not going to dive into that whole thing right now. But one is that men are bred to compete. And so a part of that competition, and I'm going over the sexual arena theory slightly, part of that is that women will get to procreate if they want to procreate, but they have a time limit, right? Men may not get to procreate, but evolution gives them more time to figure that out, right? Mm-hmm. And so the evolutionary advantage of men being able to procreate longer if they wanted to is because some of them are not going to get to procreate, right? So time is the idea of procreating and having children, it's like the pressure is way more on a man, right, biologically, than it is a woman. Because a woman just has to find someone, before their eggs start dying. A man may not by 50. There's a lot of men that by 50 do not procreate or have children whatsoever.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's there is a reason why some of that evolutionary and biological advantage exists. It's because men are trying to make it easier on themselves, so they have some extra time to figure this out, right?
Yeah.
And more time to compete, right? But I don't know if that necessarily makes it any easier, a 50-year-old man competing with a 20-year-old man to have sex with a woman or whatever. I don't think it makes it easier, but it might give them more time. The other huge aspect, and most people don't talk about this at all because we don't care about family anymore in society. We act like that doesn't mean anything, and boy, have we proven how wrong that is that by having this sort of shorter time span for women, the pressure is on to have a family, right? So there's sort of this, like, once a woman reaches like their mid-30s, if they haven't settled down and they haven't had kids, regardless of how successful their careers are, how happy they are, their friends, family, all that kind of stuff. If you talk to psychologists who have to deal with these hyper-successful women, they will tell you most of them are not happy with their life. Okay? And you don't have to listen to me. Again, like, quote my dad, I'm a fucking nobody, blah, blah, blah. I'm just a little guy, whatever, But go listen to some clinical psychologists about what these hyper-successful mid-30 plus women are doing who do not have families. Okay? They're not happy. And I think there is something to having little yous running around, okay? Little spawns, all right?
Little spawns.
And the challenges and the joys that they bring that gives more value to life. And then all of the spawns they're going to have, right? Like, if you're going to live to 80, okay, you're going to have a lot more going on than your career, especially after you're like 50, 60, right? Then what are you going to do? Are you just going to work yourself to the bone until it, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's just all you're going to do is your career?
Oh, God.
Like, look, there's some people that might be great, right? If you're like a hyper-successful artist or a writer or an actor or actress, movie star, musician. There are some. Yeah, I can imagine there are some career fields I would love to be in for the rest of my life. Sure, but are you going to say that to bricklayers? Are you going to say that to engineers? Are you going to say that to doctors? You really think these people want to be doing this when they're 75 to find meaning in life? Like, no, right? So you have to sort of give a time where everything's give credit where it's due, right? And then there are stages of life and stages of what you're going to find important in those areas of your life, right? You might not think partying is all that great when you're 70 years old, but my God, when you're 18, it's the greatest fucking thing in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And there's lessons to be learned at 18 when you're going to parties. There's not as many lessons to learn when you're 70, okay? So I think family is very, very important, and it brings a lot of joy and happiness, and it brings a lot of security in having people around for you when you're older, right? And that's really, really important. I think people that don't have people who are there for them and into old age becomes a really, really just a downhill experience from then on, right? There's enough things going downhill as you get older than to be completely alone. Man, that sucks. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of joy that you can find in seeing, your offspring or your grandchildren sort of grow up and come into their own and teaching them, helping them along, right? Mm-hmm. And so women sort of have a head start on that, right? Because of the biological pressure. And so women kind of have to go at a certain point, they have to go, career is going to have to take a break or it's going to have to go part-time because family comes first, right?
Yeah.
Whereas men who have a lot of this pressure to provide, be the provider for the family, right? That's sort of a role. And it's because what else would you have a man do, right? Like, what else is a man supposed to do when his wife gets pregnant or girlfriend gets pregnant or something like that?
Right.
Like, what else is he supposed to do? Is he supposed to sit around and just play video games, smoke a joint, be like, yeah, good luck. Yeah. Want a foot rub? It's like, what else is he supposed to do? Well, you hope that he's making enough money so that you can make sure that everything's going smoothly with your pregnancy. Right? So, and it gives him some meaning. It gives him some sort of like, oh yes, this is how I can contribute, right?
Yeah.
Because without him doing anything, he's going to feel useless. Do you want him to feel useless? Well, that's kind of mean. It's kind of rude.
Yeah.
It's like if you have your role is to be the biological, the nurturer of the baby and the one that's going to have to carry it, It's kind of like, well, you want to make sure that goes smoothly. So you're not really worried about what they demand of you at work. You're more like, I'm making sure that everything's going smooth here. So you want to be able to have somebody else contributing, right?
Right.
And and I don't want to get too brain farty here, but so a lot of pressure gets put on a man, and if a man doesn't, that social pressure is still there. So you could have these hyper successful guys who, maybe they have plenty of sex, but they make sure they wear a condom, and then they're like 45 years old, they don't have a family. And you're like, oh my God, look at this guy and all he's got these boats and mansions and trucks and hoes and all this kind of stuff.
He's not even happy.
But you really think he's happy?
Yeah.
It's
a big, big thing.
It's easy, right, because like in 10 years, he might be the most alone person he might be one of the most lonely, bitter people on the planet. And he's got all this money. And you really think money's going to solve any of that? It's like maybe you can dilute your loneliness and your bitterness with hookers and cocaine.
Yeah,
but only for
only
for so long. You know what I mean? So
sure.
I think that there is an advantage to some of that pressure that happens on women because men being able to delay that longer doesn't really serve them in the end. Right?
Sure.
And I think having a time and a place for everything, it's like, I think it's better for you biologically in a lot of ways to be having your kids not when you're 50.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Right?
Yeah.
You're just not going to have the energy, all kinds of
I personally would not want to do that.
What?
Like, wait that long. You know?
Well, right.
Obviously I probably wouldn't be able to, but like if I was a dude too, I probably wouldn't want to wait that long either, you know?
And I brought this up to a female friend of mine recently, and she said, well, there's medicine out there now that allows you to have children into your 40s, blah, blah, blah. Some of it, they were talking about birth control, how the birth control actually creates a reservoir of eggs in your uterus or something, and something like that. And my point back to her was, does it change your physiology? There's all kinds of complications you have with birthing. Does it change how your hips function? Does it give you any sort of youthful or strength or improvement in the development of how your physiology is going to help you push that kid through, or is all that the same? Because that's where all the health complications exist.
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah, I've never heard of anything like that. That's fucking crazy.
Well, yeah. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, it's just kind of a stretch, that whole point, and maybe a little bit of a stretch, but I think that there are biological disadvantages to being a man. I think the biggest one is the competition bit, because it's like, how, like, imagine the worst possible existence in the world, right? And it's like complete and utter rejection, completely being forgotten about, right? That's why these school shooters, like, that's why they go shoot up a school, is because they know their name is going to be infamous.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like,
true.
well, I'm not going to remember. Nobody notices me. Nobody recognizes me. This is my last option, right? At least that's how a lot of them feel, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So, the worst possible existence is like being forgotten, being unnoticed, and that happens way more to men than it does women.
Yeah, rejection as well. Yeah.
So, that's where I'm like, well, that might be the biggest consequence of being a man, is the fact that because men are more competitive and because men have to sort of fight for the worthiness of procreation with females, because females are this embodiment of the kind of like the biological selection mechanism of how humanity is going to progress, right? Because women are so picky.
Yeah.
And rightfully so, but because of that, men suffer in the competitiveness area where they have to compete, and there's going to be so many of them that lose.
Yeah,
right?
that's very true.
And it's kind of like that's the grittiness of nature, right?
Right,
and so, but nobody says it that way. No one really talks about it like that.
No, not really.
So.
Very interesting perspective. Very. A lot to think about. Yeah. Even if I don't agree with all of it, it's a lot to think about.
Yeah, for sure. So the video goes into, I don't know if you want to talk about the video for Be a Man.
I mean, so I made some notes about what was said in the video. I could say a couple of them.
Yeah.
So the first one was, don't be a fag, or like, what are you, gay? Like that's a big, I mean, it is a big thing, but I also feel that was something more back in the day, maybe like early 2000s, 90s and before, like that was more of like, oh, what are you, gay or whatever kind of thing. Now it's a little bit more normalized. Would you agree with that?
I would say the last 10 years or so, the LGBTQ community is like become such a powerhouse that you can't you can't say that kind of stuff without like painting a Nazi symbol on your forehead.
Gosh, yeah. Some of the other things were to be chivalrous. Is that a word even? Like, I just wrote it down. Be chivalrous but not too much. Be rough but soft. Be kind yet cruel. Don't cry, shake it off. Like, you're a man, don't cry. And then the one I kind of wrote down, actually, I said, oh, you don't party, bro? Oh, now you're sober. Just because, like, I actually see that a lot in men, too. Maybe they're just picking at their friends or whatever, sometimes. But, like, that's a big thing. And that could be, like, another topic, too, where, like, when people go sober, maybe they were drinking a lot or had a drug addiction, it's kind of frowned down upon, like, in groups of men. I don't know if you would agree with that, but I see that a lot. That wasn't even in the video. That was something I wrote down. But there's a lot of other things said in the video, just mostly like, like, you're weak, be strong, fight for our country, all these kind of quotes or things that were said in the video.
Well, right. And I had an issue with the guy in the video for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
But because, I don't know, I always have an issue with people who don't fairly represent who they're trying to represent.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you find that in a lot of different areas of life.
Maybe if these people watch the video, they'll kind of understand. We don't even have to... It was kind of... Yeah.
Well, right. I mean, it's clear this guy doesn't have kids. And that's something that, like, if you're going to talk about being a man, I think talking about being a father is central to that. Right?
Yeah, he did
and maybe you're like, oh, you have to, in order to be a man, Zach, you have to have kids? Yes.
Yeah, that's your opinion.
You're going to, I mean, because everything else you could call being a man,
sure,
you could have, but you don't have fatherhood. So fatherhood is something that you can have everything else, and you can be a father and talk about everything else that goes into what you would consider being a man.
Yeah.
Right? Everything else. But for people who don't have the fatherhood aspect, you're limited to so much except for actually raising other human beings. I think that's a very central thing to when you're talking about what being a man or being a woman really, really is at the heart of it. Because like there are so many, that's where we become different creatures, right? We become different creatures on this biological level that it revolves our sex, right? We have different functions in sex and procreation and then raising of children, right? And so you only get half of that when you're talking about what happens before you have children. I mean, there are differences, but there's only half, right? The other half of the differences between men and women come after the pregnancy happens, right? After a woman gets pregnant. Well, now what's different? And for people who have had kids, you notice that and you see that, right? You get to see the whole other side of the differences between men and women, right? And how they have to work together, to raise kids. So it's clear this guy doesn't have kids. So I think some of that can get twisted, and with a lot of this, again, it's kind of like it is like the flip side. It's like the guy's side, right? Sure. But I have just as many qualms about this stuff. Because it's like this is like, again, clearly it's probably like a highly neurotic guy, okay? He goes, oh, woe is me, the whole world is against me. It's like the whole world tragedy. Here's a great line I heard somewhere, and I this is not my own. Tragedy is a precondition of life. Tragedy is a precondition of existence. You can't escape it, okay? You can't escape it. It just comes with. It comes with being. Yeah. Okay? It's a precondition. So, you're not going to... You can't run away from it. You can't get rid of it. You need to learn to be more low-trait neurotic. You need to take a page out of the Stoic book and learn to let things roll off your shoulder. Okay? Yeah. Van Halen said it in that song, a great classic Jump. Okay, you gotta roll with the punches to get to more thrill. All right. Yeah. So, so some of this, although I can agree with some of it, right? I think there are very, very important characteristics in people that we shouldn't lose with so much of the what is expected of men, what's expected of women. I think people just need to hold themselves to a high standard of be more. You can always be better than who you were yesterday. Always. On anything. Yeah. There's always areas of improvement. Absolutely. And I think culturally there's a sort of pullback of, you have to love yourself. You have to think you are perfect just the way you are. And that doesn't help anybody. Okay? No one's perfect the way they are. There's no amount of convincing or stupid talks you could listen to convince you of that. Because there's always going to be a voice inside the back of your head going, the fuck are you doing? You could be doing better. What are you doing? You know what I mean? Yeah. We all have that voice. And to ignore that, to act like that doesn't exist, to act like you're perfect the way you are and you're deserving of love, it's like, no. Everything in around you, everything in life, everything in nature, everything inside of you is saying no. You can be better. So
and that's not that there's anything wrong with like being self-confident and like
not at all. Well, no, not
but you
not
have
at
to
all.
yeah. What you're saying is just like you have to like remember like to keep pushing yourself and to better yourself. You're not always. You shouldn't just become comfortable with who you are all the time because I don't know, everybody should just self-reflect at some point, just clarifying your point a little bit.
Well, right.
Some people could take it the wrong way.
Well, I almost want to take back what I said. I think this
is,
I think what we're talking about is, this is where being too confident, this is where it's like people are trying to supplement low confidence with narcissism.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
And that's not how you do it, right? What you want to do is you want to take people with low confidence and give them a load to carry. That way, when they fall on hard times, they can go, you're right. Maybe I ain't shit, but at least I can carry that.
Yeah.
And that gives you pride. And that gives you pride, a sense of pride. You're proud enough in yourself that even on hard times, you might go, I can improve. You're right. Yeah. There are things I can work on.
Yeah, I like to be able to admit.
But at least I can do that. Right? And so there's a balance. Like I said, going back to the personality trait stuff, like you want to be able to integrate things, right? And so it's not that there's always this like black and white answer, it's that you want to be able to integrate these parts of your personality. And so I would say no. I think that I think what I said before would hit it on the head is as far as we're supplementing or treating low confidence with narcissism, and that is a problem. Right? What you need to treat low confidence with is something that people can work for and be proud of.
Yeah.
But not narcissistic. Right?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
And so and to try and tie it in with some of these videos. So what the guy was saying, some of his quotes: be chivalrous but not too much, right? Be rough, but soft. Be kind, cruel. Don't cry, shake it off. Yeah. And some of this is kind of talking about what I'm saying here is that what we demand as men and as women of each other, sometimes we give each other mixed signals.
Yeah.
Right? And that's kind of the trouble of it all, is that we're not clear enough in our communication. Right? And then also, what one boyfriend or one girlfriend wants isn't always what the next one wants. So there's also always that sort of anecdotal individual element that you can't escape. But I think there's more nuggets of wisdom than there are real criticisms in some of these quotes, right? Be chivalrous, but not too much, right? I.e., if for a man, that means be gullible, forgiving, loving of a woman, but know when to put your foot down.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You can
take a more positive approach on that.
Exactly. You can take all this kind of stuff and you can spin it in another way without denigrating being chivalrous, and without denigrating sticking up for yourself, right?
Yeah, and I hate to go back to the media thing, but that just reminds me that the media is so negative. Like they're portraying all these things. Like I didn't even think of it that way, and you really could turn it around, and just make it worded more positively. And a lot of things, you'll even see like articles and they'll have like bold letters of negative things that were in the article, but then you go and you open up that article and actually it's not that bad. Like the story was like not as bad as it's portraying itself. And you see things like this, and I guess people could be portraying that more negatively because of the way that it's written or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a big thing.
Let's run through some of these, right? Like don't cry, shake it off. You're not allowed to have emotions. What do we talk about neuroticism? Right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, some of that can be good, right? It's important, in neuroticism, it's important to be self-aware. And that's high neuroticism, right? So it's important to be self-aware, but it's also important to be able to shrug things off, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in that sense, don't cry, shake it off. Sometimes that's what you need to hear, right?
Yeah.
Other times, like that's a really shitty thing to say to somebody at a funeral,
yeah, very
right?
much so.
Your dad died? Don't cry, shake it off. Like that's really shitty, right?
Yeah.
But let's say you're talking to like your 4-year-old son, he scraped his knee, and he's barely got a little scrape on there. It's like, don't cry, shake it off, Is that toxic masculinity? I mean, I do that.
Somebody who will be like, yes.
I do that to my 4-year-old daughter, and she's awesome. She's great. She'll fall and she'll get right back up and she'll keep playing. You know what I mean? And I get more like, oh, are you okay? She's like, I'm fine, Dad.
Yeah, you have to teach them.
It's like,
like that whatever that the word is, but you have to teach him that lesson, whatever. I'm having a brain fart.
Yeah, well, right, and it's not...
Or being oversensitive, you don't want to be too oversensitive.
This is something that, what you're saying right there kind of dives into a whole other rabbit hole of you teach them, right?
Yeah.
Teach them. Just
teach
them.
The whole parenting
Parents,
thing.
why don't you teach your kids? And it's like, well, as a society, when we break down the family, and when we kind of breed people in this low confidence and highly narcissistic society, I mean, we're really our parents, who should be these more integrated creatures. I don't think we're making very good parents. I think
I do agree. I do agree.
And and it's like, it's something that starts. You say it starts with kids and educating kids, but who educates the kids? It's the parents.
Yeah.
And I think we need to really focus on parenting better. And I think some of that, it's hard to say where some of that starts, and that's a very loaded, complicated question. Maybe we can get into that in another podcast. But I really think that is, very central. And you've heard me talk about that kind of stuff before.
Yeah,
It's the family.
But it really goes back to that, too, with how things are and all this stuff, It's parenting and handing your kid a tablet instead of teaching him a lesson or talking to him.
Yeah.
Communicating, you know? Yeah. And then they're seeing all this online, too, and they're getting it in their head. Like, this is a whole thing,
Yeah,
It's like,
wow. Do you want the internet to be your kid's parent, or do you want to be your kid's parent?
Yeah, right.
Because, look, if you're not going to parent your kids, the internet will parent your kids.
Yeah.
And I don't think that is... Oh, I think that's so bad. The internet's full of all kinds of wackos and perverts and crazy people and or just people who are not responsible. So not even the extremes, but just a lot of people who are irresponsible, including myself. So, just kidding. But so I don't know. I don't know.
This was a whole podcast.
Yeah, I know. We're gonna do a short one, and I think this turned out to be pretty
really go off on little tangents and stuff, but sometimes it kind of came back around and connected. It seemed at the
I
end
had
there.
no idea I was gonna get into the personality traits there, but
at first I was, like I said, it was kind of like, well, and also so everybody knows I've never taken psychology, so like. When I learn about psychology, it's very interesting to me. I always wish I had taken psychology or something, gone into it a little bit more. So, like, I might have sounded a little bit dumb, like, being like, oh, wow, but, like, I really haven't ever looked into those kind of things, like, and I feel it's very important,
Well, right, especially on, like, a video like this where some people are going to watch it and have all kinds of opinions. But,
oh my gosh, yeah.
But people...
Watch till the end, okay, because...
Yeah, but people aren't going to... like look into like something like psychology, right? And dissect it this way. They're going to have these very rash, immediate emotional responses to a highly provocative video, right?
Yeah.
Like this video is clearly meant to just like be this 2.5 minute long, blah, this is what's wrong with
negativity.
men. And well, yes, it's a lot of negativity, right? These negative emotions. Women are going to go, yeah, poor victims, poor us,
Yeah.
Then men are going to go, well, what the fuck? What about me? And so it's meant to kind of rivet you like that.
Yeah.
Same thing with the be a man thing, I think, a little bit. More so with the be a lady. I think that's more flying in your face.
Highlighted negativity, I feel is the word for it,
In both. Here's
both.
what I find in both, though. In both, I think in be a lady, I would say more of those things are things that women say to women. And in be a man, those are more things that men say to men.
Absolutely, actually. I really do agree with that, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think the be a man was trying to put a spin on it that like women say these kinds of things to men. Maybe that they think that way.
I don't think that video, it was only like 6,000 views or whatever. But, and that guy was kind of like just a random dude that didn't seem like he had gone through any of this, but like maybe if it was done again.
I think he was more so speaking for the LGBT community when he was speaking on the be a man. Like a lot of his things had to do with what are you, gay? What are you, queer?
Which maybe that's not bad, but if it's be a man, like I don't know, it should just be more generalized.
LGBTQ men account for something like 2 or 3% of the population.
Yeah, the video could have been titled differently too.
Yeah.
Like criticisms in the LGBT community or something. I don't know.
Well.
Or like
maybe. I don't know. I don't know. But so, I think some of that. Although there are a lot of things that he talked about that do apply to all men, there were some things that apply to a hyper-specific group of men, and so
more than
I think that one could be a video that could be done differently. The Be a Lady one seemed to really cover women very well.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe you could redo the Be a Man one.
Maybe I will.
You do it.
So
I don't know.
But yeah.
This is very interesting.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting talk. Well, thank you guys for listening in. Tune in next time I think we're going to be going over some modern spiritual practices. We're going to have a Reiki healer on, as wackadoo as that might sound.
Wow. Interesting. I haven't heard this yet.
Do you know Andrew Linendahl?
I might have. That sounds. His name sounds familiar, but I don't know a face to the name.
He works at the Infinity Center in Elkhorn. So So we're gonna have him on, and he's gonna talk a little bit about some of his spiritual practices. And I'm a big skeptic, but I did try the Reiki thing a couple of times.
Sure.
And the first Reiki healing he gave me was just like super accurate, and I was
interesting.
And I'm like. And being a skeptic, I'm obviously, and someone who's really into human psychology, I'm like picking everything apart.
Yeah.
And he was like, it was too specific. He was like, think about whatever. And then I'm like sitting there, and he's got his hands like, sort of like by me. Or sometimes he would like put his hands on my back or something like that. And then all of a sudden he's like talking about things that I was thinking about. And I'm like, he didn't give me a prompt. He wasn't like he's like pick a number 1 through 10. Like there's no way in hell that he could have thought about these certain things. Or like, you know what I mean? Like there's no way in hell he could have got this.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm like, that's weird. So we'll kind of dive into that, and I'm gonna be again probably more of the skeptic on that talk, but join us for that next time, and thank you for listening, and have a good one.
Bye-bye.